show you part 2 of the morel mushroom hunting video. And what we're going to look at today is what we do once we bring them in from the woods. Now, whenever you bring your mushrooms in, you'll just want to go ahead and get a sharp knife and split the mushroom right down the center, from the top of the cap to the bottom of the stem. And we do this just to open it up and get the bugs out, essentially. Sometimes there'll be slugs, snails, other little woodland critters that find the inside of these little mushrooms an ideal place to make a house, kind of like in the cartoons. So anyway, you want to go ahead and split those down the middle. Once again, a sharp knife is pretty important. Otherwise, because the morels are fairly delicate and they'll crush if you have to use too much force while you're cutting them. And then once you do have them all cut up, you want to place them in water. You can see here that I've just been adding these to water. And add an ample amount of salt. I've already added some to this container, so I'm not adding too much more here. Now occasionally you'll find one too with a little bit of dirt left on the bottom of the stem where it was attached to the ground. Just go ahead and cut that off and discard it. And just one last thing to mention, sometimes some of these mushrooms will appear to be a little bit dry. That's no big deal. Just once again, handle them pretty gently, throw them in the water, and they will rehydrate nicely over the course of about a half a day. So the next thing on the agenda is to cook these up, and we'll do that tomorrow morning when we have these with biscuits and gravy. Okay, once you get all those mushrooms cut up, once again, make sure you have enough water to get them all submerged. And, put a lid on them. And set them in the fridge for about 12 hours. And at that point, we'll give them another rinsing and cook them up for breakfast tomorrow. The mushrooms have been soaking for about 24 hours now, and it's time for breakfast, so let's go ahead and get them cooked up. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is to just go ahead and drain that water off that they've been soaking in. And hopefully any dirt or little critters went along with it. And I like to give them a good rinsing at the sink. Have to kind of be somewhat gentle with these, because like I said, they are fairly fragile. And I like to transfer them back and forth several times just to make sure they're good and clean. Oh, have an escapee. And I like to keep moving them back and forth until I see that they're clean. And the next step in preparing the mushrooms is to let them drain for several minutes, and once that's done, I'll take about a cup of all-purpose flour, and of course depends upon how many mushrooms you have to cook up, and not quite, or about a tablespoon of cornstarch. And I'll mix these up. There's flour and cornstarch going everywhere here. This is why I don't get allowed in the kitchen very often. once the flour and cornstarch are thoroughly mixed, just grab a handful of mushrooms. I think we have about enough for 2 skilletfuls, so I'm going to do about half of them right here. And toss them until they're thoroughly coated. And then we'll take them over to the skillet to fry. And we like to skillet fry our mushrooms, and I use about a ½ inch or so of canola oil, and we'll get that good and hot before we put the mushrooms on. Now once your oil is hot, you can test that just by putting a few drops of water in your oil, and if it bubbles like that, you know your oil is ready. It's important to make sure the oil is hot enough so the oil doesn't soak up into the mushrooms. Now, once it's hot enough, go ahead and put your mushrooms in. I like to put the biggest ones in first because they'll need the longest to cook. And they should begin to bubble immediately as you put them into the oil. Smelling pretty good. I try not to let them overlap too much. Now some folks will actually use a flour and egg mixture, but we simply like the flour and cornstarch. That way the flavor of the mushroom really comes through. And you'll notice whenever we floured these earlier, we made sure that the flour mixture got into the little holes, the little spaces within the cap of that mushroom. You'll want to use about a medium to medium-high heat to cook the mushrooms. And like right now, they've been on the skillet about a minute and a half. And they've already started firming up and turning kind of a golden brown on the parts that are in the oil. You can see it's getting a little bit more rigid, and that means it's time to flip. Now you can deep fry these as well. I almost have enough oil here to consider this a deep fry. A little more than what I usually use. But we'll make sure all parts of these mushrooms have been submerged in the oil. Usually about a total of 3 to 5 minutes is what it takes, depending on your heat. But the one thing you don't want to do is overcook a mushroom, because that'll take all the flavor out. Now these are firm and but yet not overcooked. You can see they're a nice golden brown, and they are ready to come off the skillet. I like to put them on a paper towel to soak up the extra grease. Oh, these look delicious. Alright, so we're ready to put the next batch in. And once again, when you put those first mushrooms in, they should sizzle. I think cooking pretty good. You want to see that sizzling right away. That means the moisture is being driven out of the mushroom, and that's what you want to happen when you fry something. If the oil is not hot enough, that actually allows the food that you're cooking or frying time to absorb the oil, and you definitely don't want that. That's kind of what gives it a more greasy, oily texture. We've all had foods that have soaked up way too much oil, and you can avoid that just simply by making sure your oil is plenty hot. A little bit of the science behind frying here. Being a science teacher, I just like to share these little tidbits. That cooking oil is well above the boiling point of water. So when you drop any food into that oil that has any sort of moisture content, it drives the moisture in that food to the boiling point and causing it to vaporize right away. And that's actually what the bubbles are. The bubbles are water vapor that's leaving the food. And you need to make sure, once again, that that's happening right away as soon as that food hits the oil. If your oil is too close to the boiling point, it might be, how shall I describe this? If your oil is, say, only 250 or maybe 300 degrees and you put a lot of cool food into it, it'll lower the temperature of that oil to the point where it's no longer at the boiling point, and then it'll start absorbing the oil. So once again, key is having good hot oil. Not too hot though, you don't want it to get to that smoke point or anything like that. So that's a little bit of the science behind frying. Looks like we have the official taste tester on hand to see how they are. Gonna give it a try?
Yeah. Good.
All right. And one thing to keep in mind with the mushrooms, if you've never eaten them before, you do need to make sure you eat a small serving at first to see how you're going to react to it. And while the morels aren't going to kill anybody, a few people, they do give some stomach discomfort too. So you want to be careful. And you can figure that out once again with a smaller batch or eating a smaller meal of them at first. Well, here we are ready to enjoy. So we had Leah on biscuits, and my wife, she made some gravy. So all we need now is a little bit of pepper and salt. And we are ready to enjoy. Delicious.